Now unfortunately I cannot include the entire raw palette in the small size I'm recording for a streaming video. Unlike many of the other windows, it refuses to be made smaller, and I think I've got just about enough on screen, and if necessary we'll move it. The first thing I want to look at is the sharpness of the image. So I'm going to go to the top left of my screen. It's just off of what you can see, but I'm going to double click the zoom tool, which brings my image up to 100%, and I can move around to an area so that I can see to inject a little bit of sharpness into the image. So I'm going to go to my sharpening tools, holding down the Alt key. I'm going to use the mask to mask all the black areas that you can see, because I only want to give myself some extra sharpness on the edges. I'm going to step that sharpness up. If you look at the numbers there, you should see them snap into a crispness, and they're looking pretty good straight away. Now if I go up to the top left again, it's off the screen once again, but double clicking the hand tool brings the aircraft onto the screen fully, although we're losing the back end. Let's go back to the basic option here and look at what we have. I'm going to move the whole window up here a little bit so we can see the controls down the bottom, because I don't think we need to adjust the temperature, but we could do, but we did make those adjustments in Photomatix. We shouldn't need the exposure or the recovery or fill light or blacks if we've done our job right with the exposures and HDR. Of course these have been dealt with in the HDR, but sometimes we want to make some small changes to suit exactly the effect we're looking for. We may want to increase the brightness a little bit, but I think we've got some good detail coming through on the aircraft. We may want to give more contrast. The slider that I'm quite taken with is the clarity slider. If you look at the aircraft, and I can push this up to the 3/4 position, we're not seeing a great deal of difference. Let me try going up to its maximum, and now we can. So we need to be a bit careful here, so I'm going to go about 2/3 up from where we are, but you can see how we get a great clarity come forth in the image. And if I double click that zoom tool again, we're not losing any detail or gaining any ugly pixel effects in doing that. The other thing we may want to look at is the fine tuning of the colours. Now working HDR images through Adobe Camera Raw is not part of the HDR process. We could just accept the image as it's generated by the tone mapping part of Photomatix. This is just my preference. One part that I like quite a lot, I don't think we're going to need to do it with this particular image, but I found a use for the hue, saturation and luminance sliders in many of the HDR images I've created, because here we can affect just one colour. So let's assume here that we wanted to click the saturation tab and just give a little bit more saturation to the blue sky. You can see by stepping it up I can do that. Rather too much I would suggest, but nevertheless if we wanted to do that we can, and I'll just measure that a little bit. And of course if we wanted to darken the sky, if we choose the luminance slider and move the same slider the other way, we can darken the sky just a little bit. Now just off the screen at the bottom left I've got the button to open the image into Photoshop, and I think that's what I'm going to do. So here we have my final image, and the only thing that I want to do in Photoshop is to do just a little bit of cloning. I had a few dust marks in the sky which I cloned out within a few seconds, but other than that the image is complete. So it may be a good exercise at this stage to compare the HDR image we've created with the one we probably would have started with had we not been shooting for HDR. Remember from those 3 images we looked at right at the start, we virtually had one that was too dark, one that was too light, and we had one that was a compromise in the middle. So I've opened up the compromise in the middle, and we're going to compare our image with that one. Now just in case you're wondering where all of the palettes have just disappeared to, if you hit your tab key in Photoshop at the end of a piece of work like this, it removes all of the palettes down the right and left and some of the information along the top of the screen, gives us an opportunity to get the image as big as we can in Photoshop. And there's the image we probably would have started a manipulation with, one that is a compromise between being too light or too dark. But what HDR has allowed us to produce is this image. Now I think that's a pretty impressive result from Photomatix, from 3 automatic bracketed exposures taken on a tripod with a cable release with my camera set to aperture priority. A massive difference between the image we may have started with and what the HDR has allowed us to produce. Now don't forget, if you visit the Beckham Digital website, www.beckhamdigital.co.uk, bottom left of the menus you'll see the ePhoto zine. You can open up this image at the size we have it now. And when you visit the website, don't forget to take a look at the HDR tutorial DVD and maybe some of our others too. Here I've just brought up the video page of our HDR DVD. All of the videos here have been recorded at 1024 pixels by 768, so the videos you'll be watching on the DVD will fill your PC screen, and you can see the varying subjects we've covered through this fascinating part of digital photography. My name's Barry Beckham. See you next month.